Hey guys, it's Laney and welcome back to the shop. Now a couple of days ago I put out a short little video showing you guys a sewing bench that I had as well as this round stool. And this stool is what we're going to build in this project video. The stool is pretty cool. It's 24 inches tall. It's got a footrest on the front and the back, crisscross legs, and the great thing about this stool is that it folds up completely collapsible. It's pretty lightweight and it's great to, for storage. You can fold it up or you can take it with you on the go. Now, to get started with this project, I've got a couple of maple boards here. I'm going to make our stool. We're going to make another one, and I'm going to use maple. Now, the maple boards I have, it was an 8-foot board by about 10.5 inches wide, and it was a 4/4 board. So I planed it down, and I was hoping that when I cleaned it up, that I would clean it up and get it planed down to about 7/8 of an inch, and it would, everything would be nice and good to go. But unfortunately, because there were a lot of defects in it, and evidently when this board was milled, something was off with the blade, maybe the set in the teeth or something, but there was a lot of deep gouges and everything. So by planing it up and getting it cleaned up, I was only able to clean it up to about a 1/2 inch. One of them's 3/4 and one of them's about 5/8 to a 1/2 inch thick, which kind of puts a damper on the goal that I was shooting on for at least 7/8 of an inch. I'd love to have 1 inch because that's what our top is. The top of the stool is 1 inch thick, as well as our legs and everything. So what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to laminate some of these boards together. I'm going to have to glue them together and to get our 1 inch thick top, so we can go ahead and cut the circle out for the stool and then get the leg parts and everything else cut out, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, with these being rough sewn 4/4 boards, one of the sides of them, it needs to be cleaned up so I can go ahead and have a reference edge to run up against my table saw fence, to rip the boards down to their lengths that we're going to work with. And I don't have a joiner in the shop. So what I do when I need to joint an edge of a board is I use my router table. I also, at times, I use my table saw. I have a sacrificial fence that's set up for joining boards on the table saw. But this time we're going to use the router. I'm going to show you the setup on that and how I go about getting one good reference edge. And so let's go ahead and move this out of the way. Set it aside for now. And we will get started on getting these boards planed up and get them ready to start gluing together and getting our individual parts made out of them. I've got the boards cut down. It was one full 8-foot board. I've got them cut down to 2 4-foot sections. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get over to the router table, and I'll show you the setup on the fence on that to turn the router fence into a joining fence or a joiner. And we'll go from there. Alright? Okay guys, in order to turn the router into a joiner, we need to create an offset on the outfeed side of the fence. This offset will account for the amount of material that we're taking off that board and allow that board to pass past the bit and onto the flat level surface of our outfeed side of the fence, accounting for that amount of material that was taken off the board as it was passed by the bit. And let me show you exactly how we're going to do that. Okay guys, on the fence, if you recall, in an earlier video I built this fence for the router table, which I'm glad I did. And when I built the fence, it has adjustable panels right around the bit, so I can adjust for the different diameters or different size bits on there. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take the outfeed side fence and we're going to take it off. We're going to add in a piece of formica, a thin sheet of formica, and that formica is going to act as a shim, and it's going to push out that outfeed side of the fence, and that'll account for the depth of cut that we are taking off the board. So with that shim in, we can go ahead and secure down the panel. Get everything nice and snug. make sure that we have plenty of bit clearance. And go ahead and tighten everything down. Alright, now with that fence tightened down, you probably won't be able to see it, won't pick it up very well on the camera, but that shim behind this fence board pushes that fence out to where it's offset from the infeed side. So now what we need to do is go ahead and take a straight edge, and I've got a flush trim bit in here. Let me raise that up a little bit. Make sure I have plenty of clearance for my board. I have a flush trim bit in here, and on the top of the flush trim bit is a bearing. And I like using bits with bearings because it helps me align the fence, because I can simply just take a straight edge and put it on the outfeed side of the table, and then I can move my fence up until the bearing and the outfeed side of the table are flush with each other. Once it is, I can go ahead and lock down the fence in place. So now my joiner router table is all set up. So what we can do is, I've got the dust extraction set up in there. We're ready to go. Go ahead and get a board, and we can go ahead and pass this through. Now, because we're only taking off less than a 64th of material, it may take a couple of passes to get a nice, smooth, jointed edge on the side of this board. So let me grab my hearing protection and eye protection, and we'll get started. So now with one reference edge on each one of my boards, we can go ahead and get over to the table saw, get the other edge cleaned up, and get our parts cut down so we can start gluing things together and ultimately getting to our final parts. Alright guys, I'm ready to pass the boards through the table saw, get the other edge cleaned up, and then from there we can lay everything out, figure out what needs to be glued up to make our tops and our legs, and lay out our other pieces as well. So let's get the other edges cleaned up and move on to that step. Alright, with that done, I'm going to go ahead and start laying some things out. Alright guys, I went ahead and I ripped down one of those 10.5-inch boards in half. And I've got the two halves glued up here and clamped up. And when that glue up dries, we'll go ahead and take it back over to the router table and where I have the joiner fence set up and clean up one edge, and then we'll cut out the individual components. Now what this is going to be, the 4 legs for the stool. Now with the limited amount of clamps, I can only clamp up a certain amount of things at a time. So when this glue up is done, I'll go ahead and get the glue up ready for the stool top itself, the round top itself. And when that glue up dries, we'll go ahead and take it over to the table saw. I'll show you the jig that I got set up to cut the circle out on the table saw. And then we can start looking at the individual components that make the stool collapsible and foldable. That get mounted to that top of that stool, and we'll get this thing put together and I'll show you how to do that. Alright guys, once the board for the legs was glued up, I went ahead and ran it through the planer to get it down to 1.5 inches wide. Make sure that I was at an even 1.5 inches wide after the glue up. And then what I did is I went ahead and ripped out 4 7/8 inch wide strips from that board. Now I want to go ahead and put an angle on the ends of these boards because it's going to act as the end of the feet. When the feet are in their out position, I need an angle here so the feet sit flat on the floor, and the angle that I'm going to use is 22.5 degrees. On the other end, we're going to take and round over the end, just give it a nice arch, so that way as the parts move and everything, they can just slide and glide real nicely without any problems. This is a little 1/2 inch piece of plywood that I made as a template that I can take and put some double side tape on to the end of the board, end of the leg, and clean up some of the excess, and then I can take it over to my flush trim bit and round it over and finish up the leg. But first thing what we need to do is we need to go ahead and cut the angle on the feet. Now a trick that I learned from watching YouTube videos and everything is you can take a straight edge and set it up against your teeth here, and then take a black Sharpie or magic marker and make a mark on your table saw to show where that blade cuts. And off of that mark, I can go ahead and line my piece up because I don't want to take too much off this leg. I've already got it pretty much cut down to the length that I want it. So I want my angle to be cut from the very tip in to that 22.5 degrees on there. So I don't want a lot of waste. That's why I have these cut down to just about how tall I want them. So what this will allow me to do is that mark on the table saw will allow me to get the exact alignment that I need to make this cut. So let's go ahead and make the cut, and then I'll show you how to round over the legs. Alright, once again my miter gauge was set to 22.5 degrees to make those angled cuts. And that way, when these legs are assembled together, they will sit nicely on a flat surface. So we're going to do all 4 legs like that, and then we're going to get ready to cut the circle out on the top, for the top of the stool. And then we'll move over to the router table, and I'll show you how I used my template to round over the ends of the legs and everything. Okay guys, when it comes to cutting circles on the table saw, I've got a real simple jig for you. Basically it's a piece of 1/2 inch plywood and a piece of 3/4 inch wide hardboard, which I used a strip of hickory. I've got a lot of hickory laying around. And the hardboard acts as a runner for the miter slot, and I cut it to the exact thickness of my miter slot so that there was absolutely no play in this whatsoever. And I just glued it to that 1/2 inch strip. And basically what I did is I turned on my saw, pushed the jig through, and cut the plywood down to the exact, so it's exactly at where my blade gets cut. And that is my reference mark. That's where when I put my circles on here, the edge of my circle goes on this line, or this edge. And I have a story stick I have written on mine, because I make different size circles. And basically what you do is you get your piece of wood that you want to make the circle out of, and a pencil, which has eluded me for a second, but I found it. And find out how wide of a circle you want. Do you want a 12-inch circle? And for these stools, you want at least a minimum of a 12-inch circle, you know, for the stool top. Any smaller than that, you get kind of tight in fitting all the components underneath it and everything. So around 12 inches. And basically, what I do is I measure and find the center of the stock that I'm using. I make sure that my stock is wide enough and long enough that it's going to accommodate that I can get a 12-inch circle out of it. And when I find the center of that stock, I have just a simple circle jig, and I've got it measured, you know, for the diameter it's 6 inches. And I go ahead and just draw a circle on here to make sure that I've got a big enough piece, which I do. If not, then I would glue on, you know, and make it what I need it to be. Once that's done, I take a small little brad nail in the center, just make a hole there, because in the jig, and I'm not sure if you can see that from here, but the jig has a small little brad nail with the head cut off it, already set at a preset distance to cut this circle out. And I have a straight line on the center of my jig that I have various circles where this pin can come out and go in different places for different size, you know, diameter of circles that I need. So I've got this one set for this top. So what I'm going to do is try to fit them 2 holes together. That's the trickiest part of circle cutting. Once it's on there, it'll spin nicely. Now there's let me see this a little bit better. There is a couple of ways you can do this. You can lower your blade and rotate your stock as the blade is, you know, as the saw is on, and keep raising your blade up and up and up until it finally cuts all the way through. That's fine, well and good and everything, but I feel it takes a little too long and it's dust everywhere. So what I end up doing is I'll simply pass this through and cut off one corner, cut off the next corner, and I'll keep doing that until I get down to my circle shape, and then I'll come and clean up the circle once all the corners and everything are cut off, and when I get down to the final of it. Now you're going to see me turn the saw off after each corner cut, because those corner pieces will fall right next to the blade, and I don't like pushing the second corner through, because just in case one of those little pieces catch on that blade, I don't want it flinging across the shop or up at me or anything like that. So I always turn off the saw after each cut, let the blade fully stop, remove that piece, make the next cut, and it's just the way I do it. It's however you feel safe with your saw in doing things, but I would highly, recommend that you be careful, because as those pieces get through, if one of those corners just happened to catch on that saw blade at the wrong, position or something, it's going to turn into a torpedo, a very small torpedo, and it's just going to hit you or, cause a lot of damage. So we'll get this adjusted, get everything turned on, and I'll show you how it's done. Alright, now that I've got a majority of all of my corners cut off, and I just keep cutting corners until I'm pretty much down and I'm starting to see the shape of my circle. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit, and then I'll show you how it cleans up. Alright, and as you can see, all of the corners are mostly all gone, and we're starting to take the circle shape. So now it's just going to be a matter of setting the template right in the front part of the cutting blade, and just continue to rotate this until our circle's cleaned up. Alright, I had to reset this onto the template because it was starting to lift off and you could see a little bit of wobble in there, but you want that sitting flat on that template so there's no wobble and no chance of anything kicking back and everything, and it was just a little bit too wobbly for me. But as you can see, we'll peel this up off the template. We can go ahead and move this out of the way, and what that gives us is a perfect circle. Alright, so now with our circle cut out, our stool top, we can go ahead and take our legs over to the router table, all 4 legs, along with our template, and we can, I'm going to put some double side tape on that, and I'm going to take it over to the bandsaw first and cut off these little corners. That way I'm not having to worry about taking off too much with the router bit, the flush trim bit, and so we'll get that done.